be reading Psalms 46. God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Therefore, we will not fear, though the earth should change, though the mountains shake in the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam, though the mountains tremble with its tumult. There is a river whose streams make glad the city of God, the holy habitation of the Most High. God is in the midst of the city. It shall not be moved. God will help it when the morning dawns. The nations are in an uproar. The kingdoms totter. He utters his voice. The earth melts. The Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our refuge. Come, behold the works of the Lord. See what desolations he has brought on the earth. He makes wars cease to the end of the earth. He breaks the bow and shatters the spear. He burns the shields with fire. Be still and know that I am God. I am exalted among the nations. I am exalted in the earth. The Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our refuge.
Thanks, Jordy. How would you define a refuge? Safe place. Anything else about a refuge? What's a refuge for you? Well, not a place in the world, but how do you know something is a refuge? It's a safe place. What else? You feel very comfortable there, okay? Like peaceful. Okay. What else? It's a common place? Calming. A calming place, okay. What else? Maybe this is a congregation without very many refuges. Isn't it usually some place that we think of where we aren't surrounded by a whole lot of other people? A refuge? Well, home can be for some people. Home is the one place some people don't want to go. Those are usually called teenagers. Okay? And that's legitimate. It's legitimate, isn't it? So home is not necessarily a refuge if you're a teenager. So parents, stop working so hard. But what's a refuge? Isn't it almost always a place in our thinking? Don't we think a refuge is some place that we can be in or go to get away from things? Is that okay to say that much too about it? Well, that's not the refuge that the psalmist is talking about. Did you notice that? God is a refuge and strength. I don't know about you, but if I was thinking about a refuge before I really started reading that psalm again, I would think about a place where I didn't need to be strong. I could just go kind of, collapse and not worry about anything. A refuge and strength, a very present help in time of trouble. That's how it started. That's what the refuge was. And it didn't get you out of trouble. God doesn't get you out of trouble. God gets you through it. Yeah, is that what you think of as a refuge? Not while you're in trouble. A place to gather your strength? But this suggests that God is your strength. Our refuge and strength. Commune with God, yeah. Yeah, what's that going to do when the guy's running after you? To get you. But see, we think of refuge as a place that we like to define. My refuge, if I get to pick it, is going to be outside with a really good view. Probably of a river and mountains and, a valley maybe and things like that. That'll be a refuge for me. And maybe one other person might be there. But not very many. But some of you may not like that idea. You might like your refuge to be in a cabin or at home in your house, or you might like to be in the middle of your whole family if you got a big one, and that's your refuge. See, so the trouble with thinking of a refuge as a place is that it pretty much leaves God out of it. And the psalmist was thinking about God as a refuge and strength in times of trouble. God will get us through it, but not keep us out of it. Now, when I saw some weeks ago, as I was thinking about the sermon for this Sunday, I saw that I hated the gospel reading. I wasn't going to mess with that on Thanksgiving Sunday. The Colossians reading was even worse. And then the thing from Isaiah didn't make any sense at all, so it left Psalm 46. So I thought, okay, we'll deal with Psalm 46 on Thanksgiving Sunday. And my curmudgeonly nature at first thought, I know what to call this sermon. The many uses of God. Really, that was going to be the name of the sermon a few weeks ago. The many uses of God. And I was going to rail how our society has turned everything and everybody into a commodity. And a commodity is whatever we determine we want at a given time. It's not going to cost us too much. It'll do what we want, and then we get to discard it when we're done with it. Ask any plumber how that feels. And also, by the way, because we turn people into commodities, like plumbers, like doctors, like nurses, like social workers, like teachers, like ministers, it's not nice. It doesn't feel good when we get discarded. But it's even worse when those persons get called to fix your plumbing and you want to tell them how to do it. So see how that would have been a pretty neat sermon. I could have talked about God as a commodity, the many uses of God, and how we can't do that. But then it's Thanksgiving Sunday. It just wasn't going to work out. So I thought, well, how is this going to work out for Thanksgiving Sunday? So I thought, I know this is the time where you're supposed to go. Oh, you aren't doing it. I know if somebody provided you a refuge, how would you feel toward that person? Grateful. Thankful. See? See how? That's called a segue. And so I thought about that, and I thought, well, that's cheap. I'm going to be embarrassed. But it gets us to Thanksgiving, or to turn that around, the giving of thanks. And I think that we need some new lessons as a people, as a society, as human beings, on what it would really be like if we were thankful. One of my theses is that if you're taught to be polite by your parents, you're going to say thank you about 2,000 million times in your lifetime, okay? For instance, when I was little, and my memory still works. That's another amazing thing. And even, yeah, my long-term memory about my childhood, because you hear a lot of those things, I tell you, and even my short-term memory, like I know what I did yesterday. And if you want to know about it, see me after worship. But anyway, but seriously, I remember being taught by my parents after having to go every Sunday afternoon over to my racist grandmother's and racist aunt's house in Akron, Ohio, to have dinner. They were the only dinners in my young life that were worse than my mother's dinners. And I had to go up to them afterward and say, thank you. Because that was what you were supposed to do. That's politeness. That's in sociology terms, that's called a social conceit. Did you know that? How many of you, when you were young, were taught that kind of a thing? Huh? Were you? If somebody gives you a horrible meal, you still have to say thank you. Gosh, Grandma, it was good to see you. Bye. Well, that wouldn't have been true either, but at least it wouldn't have been an out-and-out lie about thanks for that meal. Okay? So you see what I mean about maybe some of our automatic thanksgiving is kind of phony. We do it because we think we've been taught that we should. What about if God really is a refuge and strength in times of trouble? What if that has happened to some of us in our lives? This is just one example, okay? What if that happened? Who are you going to thank? How are you going to thank? How are you going to thank God? The same way you thank your grandmother for a horrible meal? Hey, God, thank you. Go ahead. Praying. Oh, pay it forward. Pay it. Oh, yep. We'll pay it forward. Okay. How are you going to thank God? And when should we thank God for something? What kinds of things should we thank God for? Go ahead, Joel. So thank God for the ability to help others sometimes. Okay. How about sometimes we don't need to thank God for things? How about sometimes we need to thank another person for something? How about that? Somebody does something with you or for you, or even in the role sometimes of parents and teachers, to you, that makes a huge difference in your life. You might not know it until 20 years later. Ever happened to any of you? Oh, that's happened to me, let me tell you. Yes. Yeah, it really has. And you're thankful for that, aren't you? Yeah, who doesn't know it? Who doesn't know it if you don't go to them and thank them for what they did for you those 20 years ago? The person to whom you're feeling thankful. That's a little cheap, isn't it? Especially if that person is still alive. I mean, now sometimes we can't, okay, but think about that. If you have those persons in your life and you haven't taken the trouble, and sometimes it's trouble, to go to them in person and thank them for what they did for you and explain what they did and what a difference it's made in your life, are you really thankful? I'm not, if I didn't do it. I'm still looking for a high school football coach. He was a rotten coach, but he was a wonderful human being. And he lifted me up, and I went to college because of him. I would have never thought that big except for that man. And it wasn't his job even. I still haven't gotten hold of him. I almost got him when I went back for my 50th high school reunion a few years ago. But alas, he didn't make it to the reunion. So I'm still going to try to do that. I'm just giving you one personal example. So I don't have to thank God for that. I have to thank him for that. Or let me put it another way. I have him to thank for that. Okay? So that's giving thanks. It's giving thanks. It's making thanks something that's a part of ourselves and giving it to someone else. Now, you know who gets thanked a lot? A professional in our society that gets thanked a lot? Ministers. Oh, for the first, of my about 50 years now, I'd say the first 49 and a half, I had the hardest time in the world accepting thanks from people. You see, ministry, as I've told you many times, professional ministry is a wonderful privilege because people invite you into their lives at all these extraordinary times. The times of great joy and celebration, times of great sorrow, times of fear and all this stuff. You get to be part of that, and sometimes you get to really help them through. Sometimes you provide God to them. Sometimes you provide hope to them. Why, one of the reasons I learned a whole lot, everything I could about medicine without ever going to med school, I know I've told Jordy this, I was the only person for a lot of my parishioners who had the time before surgery. And I'd go there and be with them, in that, what do they call it, the pre-op room and stuff like that. I was the only one who had the time because all the doctors, including sometimes the anesthesiologists, were too tired, too busy to tell them about the wonderful thing called the pre-op shot. How many of you ever had surgery? How many of you were really scared before you went in there? Okay, yeah, a lot of us were. And you didn't know about the pre-op shot, did you? Because back in my day, you gave you a bit of an overdose of Valium. And I could guarantee my parishioners that, you know what, by the time they wheel you into the operating room, you're going to be saying, hey, do whatever you want. Life is good. You won't be a bit afraid. Now they give you this other stuff, you're out before you get in the room. But seriously, that is being helpful. And so many of those parishioners wanted to thank me for it. I had the darndest time. I had a terrible time accepting it. How many of you have a hard time accepting thanks? Do you really? Come on, be honest. How many of you have a hard time accepting thanks? Sure you do, because you're human. Guess what? If somebody wants to thank us and we sort of don't accept it, or we kind of say, oh, poo-poo, or as a social custom in some Spanish-speaking countries that we don't understand when they say de nada, you say gracias, and they say de nada, they say, oh, it was nothing. They appreciate it, and that's just a social conceit again. It doesn't mean that they're deflecting it. If we say, oh, it was nothing, we're deflecting it. And so the person didn't get to give you their thanks. You didn't get to get the gift of being thanked, which will, guess what? Enable you to have strength the next time you get a chance to do something for another person. It'll give you the strength to do it again and again and again. And you'll take it seriously how much good you can do, and you might even do a better job of it, because you've decided it's your duty to get better at receiving things. Okay? Well, thank you, Paul. You're supposed to go amen. Amen. Okay, good. Amen, okay. Now, last thing about Thanksgiving. We tend to give thanks in our culture for all of our blessings, don't we? Mm-hmm. And then we start naming off what? Too soon. A lot of us really mean it when we start with family and friends. Some people don't have a family they can be thankful for, either because of abuse and neglect or because they're an orphan or something, So, but we're lucky enough, we can start off and mean it, family and friends. But all of us in this society, we get pretty quick to things, don't we? When we think about our blessings. I mean, come on. I'm really glad I have the wonderful house I have to live in. How many of you are glad you have the place that you live in? Sure, you're glad, and you're thankful for it, okay? But that is a thing. Every time I try to tell my house thank you, it just doesn't seem to get through. But let's be serious. We get to things pretty quickly, don't you? Things are commodities. We are grateful for them because we have decided to use them in our lives to play some part in our lives. For a lot of guys, now let's be honest, guys, 60-inch TVs are so much nicer than 37-inch TVs, aren't they? And so we're kind of, hey, that's a blessing, isn't it? Yeah, I see. Yeah, it is. No, it's not. It's a 60-inch TV that we decided that we wanted, and we were lucky enough to have the money to buy it. That's all it is. It is not a blessing. Although, there are people we haven't met yet who can't afford a TV, period, because they don't even have electricity in the place that covers their head. They might think of it as a blessing. They'd be wrong. But sometimes it seems when people have things we don't have, and we wish we did, we must think they're more blessed than we are. No, not if it's stuff, not if it's things. So when do we get around to thanking God, and what do we thank God for? I think that's a tough question to answer, and the only answer I have ever come up with, so I'm going to share it with you now, in my own life and in trying to think theologically, which gets a shorter and shorter amount every year that I live, the time I can do that, is that when there is something that has become a part of my life for which I have so much thanks, so much gratitude. I am so grateful that only God is big enough to aim my thanksgiving at. Only God is big enough to say thank you and be able to accept that thanks, which is everything I have to give, and then give it right back to me. And let me be glad about it. Let it be a strength in times of trouble. But there are things in each of our lives, and this is not a question you ask in public, so I'm not going to. There are things that are real in our lives that oftentimes we don't think about. We don't take the time to think about, or we just kind of, facilely say thank you because that's the way we were taught when we were young. They're so wonderful, and they're so much a part of us that if we want to be thankful for them, only God is big enough to aim our thanksgiving. So this refuge and strength, wow. I don't have to go hide in times of trouble. It says in the psalm that nations are fighting each other, the world's falling apart. That can be true on any given day of any day in the world history, now, in the future, in the past. It can seem like that to all of us, and it says, ho-hum, God is my refuge and strength, even in times of trouble. Every time that happens to me, and I realize it happened to me, I find that only God is big enough to aim my thanksgiving at. So the art of thanksgiving, the art of giving thanks, is being wise enough to take a very good aim at our target. Those with ears to hear, let them hear what the Spirit is saying to the churches. Amen.